got to be a mass movement. It's got to be pressure from a lot of people.
Exactly.
That's what I'm interested in, is what's the tactic to get this mass movement going? Because he's saying it's an emergency, and we're all talking about a mass,
Well, let me try to just say two more things. Really, another great book is Elizabeth De La Vega's book, USA versus Bush, and then Vincent Bugliosi just did a book about how to prosecute Bush. So, getting away from the mass movement question, which is kind of a little bit based on a future moment, I think a tactic about using the courts is a great point, because all you really need is a Jim Garrison prosecutor. Remember Jim Garrison and the JFK assassination? He was pretty successful. Maybe not immediately, but he did use the courts. He did get somewhere. And the film about him 30 years later did affect legal change and opened up files. And was denounced by the Washington Post before it was even out. So that was interesting. Did you anybody else?
The problem with all of this stuff is it seems to be hard for people to grasp that you have a new enemy, more of a warmonger, an exterminating angel of austerity on the home front. He's the most dangerous imperialist you've ever seen. He's got whole dimensions of left-wing demagogy and left-wing credibility that Bush and Cheney had no hope of having. He's got a following of fanatics, which Bush and Cheney never really had, not in the sense that we see it today. You have a new enemy. You have a new, deadly, combative, brutal enemy in the House. Obviously, the historical record, well, I think the historical record is more or less there. I mean, I tried to contribute to this myself. I think it would be a grave mistake to say that Bush and Cheney are the two people involved. You'd want to include them. But you're going to leave untouched that transversal network that's going to come. Where do you think the next false flag is going to come from? I'll give you an example. David Broder writes in the Washington Post, he says, the crime, where Bush and Cheney fell short, is that they didn't use 9/11 to cut the standard of living and to impose brutal austerity on the American people. We could have done it, he says, but Bush said to people, go to the shopping center and buy yourself something nice. The ruling class is furious. Their attack against Bush and Cheney is fundamentally from the right. They're saying Bush and Cheney were not reactionary enough. They didn't kill enough. They could have killed more on the home front than they killed. They could have taken a slice out of Social Security right in the wake of 9/11. Bush could have said, let's reform Social Security right after 9/11, and that way we'll pay for the war. And they didn't do that. Now, the door to false flag is opening again. It's open wide as of today. Andrew Sullivan of the Atlantic Monthly wrote last December, a year ago December, we can't do any false flags anymore because now we have Bush and Cheney. Nobody believes them. We need to have new false flags. We need a credible president. Now they have them. They now have a president who can go on television and say, a bomb went off, it was country X. And they think that the world will believe it. I doubt it. But they believe that the world will go along with this. And based on what I see from David Broder, they can think of a false flag event with the main purpose being to crush resistance inside the U.S. in terms of labor movement and anybody who would fight austerity. The nurses' unions, the teachers' unions, the UAW, and people like this. And I think that is now very, very, very much there. Now, just remember, on October 19th, and if you don't know this, you should kick yourself in public. On October 19th, in Seattle, Joe Biden told what the scenario of the new regime is going to be. He said within 6 months, we will have an international confrontation which will be generated, and the righteousness of the U.S. position will not be immediately evident. And then he said within 12 months, our regime will be hated because our economics will be sound, we will do the right thing, but it won't be popular. That means genocidal austerity against the American people. The genocide that you've seen in the world is now coming home big time. Yeah. Not just, retail austerity. I'm talking massive, wholesale austerity. If those California welfare checks don't go out, and right now nobody seems to care, nobody cared down there today, people are going to start dying like flies. And at that point, all of these process questions and all the matters of historical justice and looking back to Bush and Cheney, I would say to you, if your targets are Bush and Cheney right now, you're spinning your wheels. You have a new enemy. You've got to face this. And if I'm too vehement, I'm sorry. That's just my style. I see a real emergency. And I see a lot of people who ought to be fighting. And I see, by the way, the libertarians, right, the Austrians in our group, they'll say, oh, and we have a guy on the list who says this stuff. He says, yeah, so some Mexicans will die in California. What do I care? Says this guy. That's a Nuremberg crime. You can hang at Nuremberg for being a party to genocide in that sense.
I have a question for you.
Somebody spoke.
I had a question for him.
Yes.
All right.
One thing I was is the B-52 that you were talking about that went from North Dakota to Louisiana.
Yes, right.
One of them is still missing.
That was the last attempt to attack Iran. That was August to September. That was the Rogue B-52 of August, September 2006. 2006.
And my second question
Oh,
is...
7, sorry, 7. The Rogue B-52 of August, September 2007. And I have to say, I put out this thing called the Kenny Bunkport Warning, and I got some luminaries of the peace movement to sign it. It was one of the best things they ever did. Most of them are foundation funded. They turned around the next day and said, oh, no, we never signed it. We have the paper they signed. The point of that was Cheney's attempt to bomb Iran. Now, that went up the chain of command, except at the top of the chain of command, at that point, they said no. And the reason they said no is that power was already shifting, right? Because power was in the hands of who? Of Gates. So Gates says, I don't want those cruise missiles used against Iran. I'm saving them for Russia. I want them used against Russia. I don't want to bomb Iran. I want to play Iran against Russia.
And my second question is about Iran. Iran's supposed to be converted to this patriot system. How does
Iran?
Iran, yeah. I've been reading some information about Iran's supposed to convert to the patriot system. This Iran.
Yes, that's
so.
How does that affect that? Look, the dollar is in free fall. I mean, the dollar is, anybody knows it. The dollar is actually being held up by the fact that Europe is collapsing faster than the U.S. right now. So the euro has been going down compared to the dollar. But the principal idea with Iran is, Brzezinski's track record is what? Brzezinski's track record is to deliver modern weapons to Iran. What could it mean? It means delivering atomic bombs to Iran. That the U.S. ships atomic bombs and missiles to Iran. Biden has already told the Israelis, this was from Haaretz, Biden says to the Israelis, dear Israelis, there's going to be a nuclear Iran and you're going to like it. You're going to sit still and you're going to do zippo, nada. You can go and kill some Palestinians for election purposes, but you're not going to lay a glove on Iran, because that's the new Anglo-American policy. And I believe it is. But they'll go to the Iranians and say, we have some nuclear missiles. You want some? They're special. They only go to Moscow. You want some? And then they'll say, you need a nuclear navy in the Caspian Sea. Right? You look at the map, there's the Caspian Sea, Baku. They'll say, those Russians are stealing your oil. Why don't you start fighting the Russians in the Caspian Sea? And here we'll give you a nice nuclear navy in the Caspian Sea. So we'll open up a real flank, a big attack into the soft underbelly of Holy Mother Russia and surrounding states. I think that's the new policy. I think the idea, bomb Pakistan and talk to Iran is the policy. Bomb Pakistan because it's a Chinese ally, it's an energy corridor for China, and talk to Iran because you want to use them against Russia.
Great. Any other questions, comments?
What distinction one new enemy? You got to remember the '92 is when Clinton came in. It's all this hope, and yet he did Oklahoma City, killed 186 people, right? Me in Arkansas trafficked drugs and put more African Americans in jail than any other president. Waco. I mean, you talk when she was talking about, don't forget 9/11. Let's not forget any of the crimes of the past, of the false flag events, because I think when you look at a bigger picture, that we, as members of the Truth Movement, need to once and for all educate the people of the world that false flag has been used against them. If we can expose any of them, then the whole thing gets exposed, and then they'll never again, we'll cross over that point in history, that they'll never be able to use false flags against the people of the world.
I agree with all this things. I'm Ron.
Oh, hello.
So we've been talking about all this. I've got it all outlined in a quote.
Does everybody know who you are?
Ron,
No.
Why don't you, this is a very important person. This is Ron Fisher from the Independent Green Party here in Virginia. He ran for Congress against Congressman Moran. otherwise known as Congressman Moron. Very well. He's part of a party